the rifle barrel pressed cold against Clara Beaumont's father's temple. Victor Hale's finger tightened on the trigger while his other hand held the deed to their land. Last chance, old man. The girl or your life? Clara's scream tore through the autumn air as her father's knees buckled. Then hoofbeats thundered from the tree line, a mountain of fur and violence exploding into the clearing, gold coins scattered across blood-stained dirt. She's not for sale, the stranger growled, but I'll buy her anyway. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels. The drought had murdered everything green in Montana Territory by October 1876. What used to be Dust Creek ran bone dry, just cracked mud and the bleached skeletons of fish that had boiled alive under the merciless sun. The Beaumont homestead looked like it was dying too, fences sagging, barn roof half collapsed, and the vegetable garden nothing but withered stalks that crunched underfoot. Clara Beaumont stood on the porch, hands gripping the weathered railing until splinters bit into her palms. 19 years old, and she'd already watched 2 full crop seasons burn to ash. Her father's cough had gotten worse last week. Her mother barely ate anymore, just pushed food around her plate with trembling fingers. And today the vultures had finally come. 6 riders approached through the heat shimmer, dust rising behind them like smoke signals announcing the end of everything. Clara recognized the black horse in front. Everyone in 3 counties knew that horse. It belonged to Victor Hale. "Papa," her voice came out strangled. "Papa, they're here." The door creaked open behind her. Thomas Beaumont emerged, moving like a man twice his 47 years. The drought hadn't just taken their crops. It had hollowed him out, carved lines deep into his face, turned his hair from brown to gray in a single summer. He'd borrowed money from Hale back in spring, promising to repay after harvest. There'd been no harvest. "Get inside, Clara." Thomas's hand shook as he reached for the rifle leaning against the doorframe. "Get your mother. Lock yourselves in the bedroom." "No." Clara stepped forward instead of back. "I'm not hiding." "Clara, I'm not a child anymore, Papa." The riders pulled up 20 feet from the porch. Victor Hale dismounted with the easy confidence of a man who'd never been told no in his entire life. 43 years old, expensive suit somehow still pristine despite the dust, dark hair slicked back with pomade that probably cost more than the Beaumont's monthly food budget. He smiled, and Clara's stomach twisted. "Thomas," Hale's voice dripped false courtesy. "Beautiful afternoon, isn't it? State your business, Hale." Thomas's knuckles were white around the rifle. "My business." Hale pulled a document from his jacket. "Why, I'm here about a debt. Seems you borrowed $300 back in April, plus interest. That comes to $412, due in full as of last Tuesday." "You know I don't have it." "I do know that." Hale's smile widened. "Which is why I've come prepared with alternative arrangements." The 5 men behind Hale shifted in their saddles. Clara recognized 2 of them, Pete Garrett and Bull McKenzie, hired guns who did Hale's dirty work when words weren't enough. Both had revolvers on their hips. Both looked eager to use them. "What kind of arrangements?" Thomas asked. "Well, I've had your property assessed." Hale gestured at the dying homestead like he was admiring a palace. "The land itself is worthless. No water, soil's played out. The buildings might fetch $20 if I'm generous. Your livestock," he paused to count. "I see 1 horse that's half lame and maybe 3 chickens." "We had to sell the rest to buy seed." "Unfortunate." Hale folded the document carefully. "By my calculation, you're about $390 short. That's a problem, Thomas." Clara watched her father's shoulders slump. 5 years ago, he would have thrown Hale off his land with both fists swinging. But 5 years of failed crops and mounting debt had broken something fundamental inside Thomas Beaumont. "Give me more time," Thomas said quietly. "Another year, I can—" "No." The single word dropped like an executioner's blade. "You've had your time." Hale's false pleasantness evaporated. "I own this land now, Thomas. You, your wife, and your daughter have until sunset to collect whatever you can carry and get out." "Where are we supposed to go?" Clara's mother appeared in the doorway, thin as a scarecrow, eyes red-rimmed from crying. "We got no family left. No money. Where do we go?" Hale looked at her with the same expression a man might give a stray dog. "That's not my concern, Sarah." "You're a monster," Clara hissed. "I'm a businessman." Hale turned those cold eyes on her. Though now that I look at you properly, Miss Beaumont, perhaps we can negotiate after all. Something in his tone made Clara's skin crawl. What do you mean? Thomas asked. Hale walked closer to the porch, boots crunching on dead grass. He looked Clara up and down slowly, deliberately, like he was appraising livestock at auction. Your daughter's what, 18? 19? You keep your eyes off her, Thomas raised the rifle. Pete Garrett's hand dropped to his revolver. So did Bull Mackenzie's. The other three riders fanned out, surrounding the porch. Put the gun down, Thomas. Hale's voice went flat and dangerous. Before this ends badly. Papa, please. Sarah moved to her husband's side. Please, just put it down. Thomas hesitated, then lowered the rifle. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. Smart man. Hale smiled again. Now, as I was saying, your daughter, she's pretty enough under all that dirt and those rags. A bit thin, but that can be fixed. Good teeth? He looked at Clara. Open your mouth, girl. Go to hell. Clara! Her father's voice cracked. Hale laughed. Spirit, too, I like that. Here's my offer, Thomas. I'll forgive the entire debt, wipe it clean, you can keep your land, in exchange for your daughter. The words hung in the air like poisoned gas. What? Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. I need a house servant for my estate in Cheyenne. Someone young, trainable. Clara would be perfect. Hale's smile never reached his eyes. She'd have food, shelter, fine clothes, much better than starving to death in this wasteland. Clara felt her mother's hand clutch her arm. You're talking about taking my daughter, Thomas said slowly, as payment for a debt. I'm talking about offering your daughter employment and your family's salvation. Hale pulled out a pocket watch, checked it. You have 5 minutes to decide. After that, my men start removing you by force, and Clara goes with me anyway. At least this way, you get to keep the land. You can't do this, Clara said. This is kidnapping. This is perfectly legal. Hale produced another document. I have a contract right here. Your father signs over your labor for a period of 7 years in exchange for debt forgiveness. All very official. 7 years. Clara felt the world tilt sideways. Everyone knew what happened to young women who went to work in Victor Hale's household. They came back different, if they came back at all. Broken. Used up. Empty-eyed. If they survived. No. Thomas's voice was barely audible. I won't do it. Then you're a fool. Hale nodded to his men. Pete, Bull, get them off this property. Use whatever force necessary, and bring the girl. The hired guns dismounted. Pete Garrett pulled his revolver. Bull Mackenzie cracked his knuckles, grinning. Wait! Sarah threw herself between the men and her daughter. Wait, please, there has to be another way. There isn't. Hale checked his watch again. 4 minutes. Clara's mind raced. She could run. But where? The nearest town was 15 miles through empty prairie. They'd run her down in an hour. She could fight. But against 5 armed men? Her father had the rifle, but he couldn't even hold it steady anymore, and the moment he pulled that trigger, they'd kill him. There was no way out. Papa? She heard herself say. Maybe it won't be so bad. No. Thomas looked at her with tears streaming down his weathered face. Clara, no. I won't let him take you. You don't have a choice, Clara's voice broke. If we fight, they'll kill you. Maybe Mama too. At least this way you survive. At least... Her throat closed up. How touching. Hale's voice dripped mockery. 3 minutes. That's when they heard the hoofbeats. Everyone turned toward the sound. A single rider approached from the north, coming fast through the heat shimmer. Even at a distance, Clara could tell something was wrong with the silhouette. The rider was too big, too bulky, wrapped in what looked like layers of fur despite the October heat. Who the hell is that? Pete Garrett squinted. The rider came closer. Clara's breath caught. The man, if it was a man, looked like he'd walked straight out of a nightmare. Enormous, maybe 6.5 feet tall, shoulders like a bull. He wore a long coat made from bear fur, and underneath that what looked like buckskin and leather pieced together from a dozen different animals. His face was hidden under a wide-brimmed hat pulled low and a thick beard that hadn't seen scissors in years. Scars ran down the visible part of his jaw. He rode a massive black stallion that looked as wild as its rider. Keep riding, friend, Hale called out. This is private business. The stranger didn't respond. He just kept coming until he was 30 feet away, then pulled his horse to a stop. Up close, Clara could see the weapons. A Bowie knife the size of a small sword on his belt, a tomahawk tucked into his saddle, and a rifle that looked like it could drop a buffalo at 300 yards. I said this is private business. Hale's hand moved toward his own revolver. Move along. The stranger finally spoke. His voice sounded like gravel grinding together, rough and unused. Heard you talking about a debt. That's none of your concern. How much? Hale blinked. What? The debt. The stranger's eyes were barely visible under his hat brim, but Clara felt their weight. How much does he owe you? $412. Now who the hell are you? Instead of answering, the stranger reached into his coat. Every gun came up. Pete Garrett aimed at his chest, Bull Mackenzie at his head, the other three riders drawing their weapons. The stranger moved slow and deliberate, pulling out a leather pouch. He tossed it at Hale's feet. It landed with a heavy thunk. Gold coins spilled out onto the dirt. There's your 400, the stranger said, plus another 100 for your trouble. Debt's paid. Clara stared at the gold glittering in the dust. That was more money than her family had seen in 5 years. More money than most people in Montana Territory saw in a lifetime. And this mountain man had just thrown it away like it meant nothing. Hale picked up the pouch, checked the contents, and his expression turned carefully neutral. That's generous of you. But it doesn't change certain arrangements we were negotiating. What arrangements? The girl. Hale nodded toward Clara. I had an agreement with her father regarding... No, you didn't? Thomas's voice was stronger now. I never agreed to anything. You were about to. But he didn't. The stranger's hand rested on his knife hilt. So there's no arrangement. Debt's paid. You can leave now. For the first time since arriving, Victor Hale looked uncertain. He stared at this massive stranger, calculating odds, weighing risks. His hired guns still had their weapons drawn, but something in the mountain man's stillness suggested drawing on him would be the last mistake they ever made. Who are you? Hale asked again. Someone settling a debt of my own. You know these people? I know enough. The stranger's voice dropped lower. Now take your gold and ride out. Hale's jaw tightened. Claire could see him wrestling with his pride, his greed, his anger. Finally, he bent down and collected the pouch, weighing it in his hand. This isn't over, he said quietly. Yeah, it is. You just made a very expensive enemy, friend. The stranger didn't respond. He just sat there on his enormous horse, a mountain of fur and violence and coiled threat, waiting. Hale stared for another long moment, then swung back onto his black horse. Mount up, he told his men. Pete Garrett holstered his revolver reluctantly. Bull Mackenzie spat in the dirt. You're sure about this? Hale asked the stranger one last time. $500 for dirt farmers you don't even know? Ride. Now. Something in those two words made Hale's horse skitter sideways. The financier yanked the reins, shot one last poisonous look at Clara, then wheeled his horse around. His men followed. Within minutes, they were just dust trails disappearing into the heat shimmer. Silence settled over the homestead like a blanket. Thomas lowered his rifle completely, hands still shaking. Sarah made a small sound that might have been a sob or a laugh or both. Clara couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what had just happened. The stranger dismounted. Up close, he was even more massive, easily the largest man Clara had ever seen. The fur coat made him look like some kind of predator that had learned to walk upright. His boots were worn but well made, his hands scarred and calloused. Thank you, Thomas finally managed. I don't know how to thank you. That was $500. I can't possibly repay. You can't, the stranger agreed. But she can. He was looking at Clara. Her father stepped forward, raising the rifle again. Now wait just a minute. Put it down, old man. I didn't ride 2 weeks and spend my savings to hurt her. Then what do you want? Clara found her voice. It came out steadier than she felt. The stranger reached up and removed his hat. His face was weathered and scarred, maybe 35 years old, with eyes the color of storm clouds. He looked at Clara like he was trying to solve a puzzle. I saved you once before, he said. Long time ago. Missouri River, near Kansas City. You were maybe 7 years old, fell through ice during the spring thaw. Your father was working the docks. I pulled you out, warmed you up, whittled you a little bird to stop you crying. Clara's world stopped spinning. The memory hit her like a physical blow, cold water closing over her head, lungs burning, strong hands grabbing her coat, dragging her onto the bank. A teenage boy with kind eyes wrapping her in his own jacket, blowing on her frozen fingers. And yes, a tiny wooden sparrow he'd carved right there with a pocket knife, pressing it into her palm while her father came running. She'd kept that sparrow for years. "That was you?" she whispered. "That was me, Elias Mercer. You disappeared. Papa tried to find you, to thank you, but you were just gone. Had to leave quick. Got into some trouble." Elias put his hat back on. "But I remembered your face, remembered your name. Month ago, I was passing through Helena buying supplies. Heard some men talking in a saloon. One of them was Victor Hale, bragging to his friends about a sweet little piece of property he was about to acquire. Land and a girl, two for the price of one. Described you down to the freckles on your nose." Claire's hand unconsciously went to her face. "Took me a while to track down which homestead he meant," Elias continued. "Longer to gather enough gold. Got here just in time, looks like." "So you paid our debt out of what? Gratitude?" Thomas asked. "For saving Clara's life 12 years ago?" "Partly." "What's the other part?" Elias looked at Clara again with those storm-gray eyes. "I want to marry her." The words fell into the silence like stones down a well. "Excuse me?" Clara's voice came out as a squeak. "You heard me. I want you to come north with me, back to my cabin in the Bitterroots, as my wife." "You're insane," Sarah breathed. "Maybe," Elias shrugged. "But I'm also offering her a choice, which is more than Hale would have done. She can say no. You all can say no. I'll write out right now. Debt still paid, no strings attached." He paused. "But if she says yes, she gets a home, food, protection, and she gets to decide how she lives instead of having it decided for her." Clara couldn't form words. This was insane. This man was a complete stranger. No, worse than a stranger. He was a mountain savage who'd appeared out of nowhere like some kind of avenging angel, except instead of wings he had knives and scars and a marriage proposal that made no sense whatsoever. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why would you want to marry someone you don't know?" Elias was quiet for a long moment. "I've been alone in those mountains for 15 years. Built a good life, got a cabin, got land, got more gold than I know what to do with. But I'm tired of being alone. When I heard Hale talking about you, heard him planning to..." He stopped, jaw working. "I couldn't let that happen. Not to the little girl with the brave eyes who didn't cry even when she was freezing to death. I'm not that little girl anymore. I can see that. You can't just buy a wife like you're buying supplies. I'm not buying you, I'm offering you a deal." Elias met her eyes directly. "You marry me, come north, give it one winter. If you hate me, I'll bring you back in the spring with enough gold to restart your family's farm and live comfortable for years. No questions asked. And if I refuse right now, then I ride out. Your family keeps their land, debts paid. But Clara..." His voice softened slightly. "Victor Hale isn't going to forget today. He'll find another way to get what he wants. Men like him always do. At least with me, you'll be 300 miles away where he can't touch you." Clara looked at her parents. Her father looked shell-shocked. Her mother was crying silently, hands pressed to her mouth. "Could we have a minute?" Clara asked, "to discuss this as a family?" Elias nodded and walked back to his horse, giving them space. The moment he was out of earshot, Sarah grabbed Clara's shoulders. "You can't seriously be considering this. What choice do I have? You could stay here. We'll figure something out." "How?" Clara gestured at the dying homestead. "He's right about Hale. That man doesn't give up. He'll come back, and next time he might not bother with offers. He'll just take me. Then we'll fight." "Bullshit. With what, Mama? We have 1 rifle and 3 bullets. Hale has an army of hired guns." Clara felt tears burning her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "At least this way I have some control. At least Elias is offering me a choice." "But you don't know him," Thomas said quietly. "He could be worse than Hale." Did you see him? Did you watch what he did? Clara shook her head. Hale would have taken me screaming. Elias paid our debt and gave me an option to refuse. That means something. It means he's smarter about his chains, Sarah said bitterly. Maybe. Or maybe he's actually telling the truth. Clara looked at the mountain man standing beside his horse, carefully not watching their conversation. He saved my life once. He just saved our farm. Maybe he's not the monster he looks like. And if he is? Her father's voice cracked. If he is, and we let you go with him, then I'll survive. Like I always have. Clara straightened her spine. We don't have good choices here, Papa. We just have bad ones and worse ones. This feels like the least bad. The three of them stood there in their dying garden while the sun beat down and the dust blew across cracked earth. Finally, Thomas looked at his daughter with tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. You did protect me. For 19 years, you protected me. Clara hugged him tight, breathing in his familiar smell of tobacco and sweat. Now it's my turn to protect you. She walked back to Elias before she could change her mind. 1 winter, she said firmly. I'll give you 1 winter. Then you bring me back here with enough gold to save this farm, no matter what. And until then, you treat me with respect. No liberties. I'm your wife in name only until I decide otherwise. Those are my terms. Elias studied her face. Fair enough. You have my word. How do I know your word is worth anything? You don't, but it's all you've got. The brutal honesty of it almost made Clara laugh. When do we leave? Now, before Hale changes his mind and comes back with more men. Now? Sarah's voice rose. She needs time to pack, to say goodbye. Ma'am, with respect, your daughter needs to disappear before Victor Hale decides $500 isn't enough. Elias pulled a smaller pouch from his coat and handed it to Thomas. There's another $50. Buy yourselves some food, fix your roof before winter. I'll take good care of her. If anything happens to my daughter, Thomas said quietly, I will find you. I don't care how deep in those mountains you hide. If anything happens to her by my hand, you won't need to find me. I'll come back here and let you pull the trigger yourself. Elias offered his hand. After a moment, Thomas shook it. Clara had 10 minutes to grab her few possessions, 2 dresses, her mother's hand mirror, her father's old pocket watch that didn't work anymore, and a worn copy of Shakespeare's sonnets her grandmother had given her. She looked around her small bedroom, trying to memorize every detail. The way afternoon light came through the window, the loose floorboard that creaked, the water stain on the ceiling shaped like a rabbit. This had been her entire world. In 10 minutes, she was leaving it forever. Sarah helped her pack, hands shaking so badly she could barely tie the bundle closed. If he hurts you, she whispered, if he so much as touches you wrong, you run. You hear me? You run, and you hide, and you find a way back home. I will, Mama. Promise me. I promise. They held each other while Thomas stood in the doorway, looking older than Clara had ever seen him. When it was time to go, her mother pressed something into her hand, the wooden sparrow Elias had carved 12 years ago. Clara had forgotten her mother kept it in her sewing box. You held on to this for a reason, Sarah said. Maybe this is it. Clara tucked the sparrow into her dress pocket and walked outside. Elias had a second horse ready, smaller than his massive stallion, but sturdy looking. He helped her mount. His hands were gentle, impersonal, helping her find the stirrups. We'll ride until dark, he said. Then camp. We've got maybe 2 weeks of travel ahead of us. 2 weeks? The Bitterroots aren't close, and we'll be going slow, letting you adjust. He swung onto his own horse. You'll be sore for the first few days. Tell me if we need to stop. Clara looked back at her parents standing on the porch of their dying farm. Her father raised one hand. Her mother's face was buried in her apron. Ready? Elias asked. No, Clara thought. I'll never be ready. Yes, she said. They rode north as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Clara didn't look back again. She was afraid if she did, she'd lose her nerve, wheel her horse around, and gallop back to the only home she'd ever known, back to safety, back to certainty, back to the slow death of drought and debt, and Victor Hale's inevitable return. Instead, she kept her eyes forward, following the enormous mountain man into the unknown. Behind them, Dust Creek disappeared into the heat shimmer like a fever dream. Ahead, the Bitterroot Mountains rose against the sky like jagged teeth. Claire's hands tightened on the reins. She touched the wooden sparrow in her pocket like a talisman. The sun set bloody and red across the Montana prairie, painting everything the color of rust and endings. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Claire's horse kept walking, following Elias's stallion into the gathering darkness. She didn't know if she was riding toward salvation or damnation. She supposed she'd find out soon enough. They rode for 3 hours before Elias finally spoke again. "There's a creek about a mile ahead. We'll camp there tonight." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Her throat felt like sandpaper, and every muscle in her body screamed from the unfamiliar rhythm of riding. She'd been on horses before, but never for this long, never at this pace. The saddle chafed through her thin dress, and her hands ached from gripping the reins. She wouldn't complain, wouldn't give him the satisfaction. The creek turned out to be barely more than a trickle between two rock formations, but the water ran clear. Elias dismounted in one smooth motion and immediately started unpacking his horse. Clara tried to copy him, but her legs buckled the moment her feet hit the ground. She grabbed the saddle to keep from falling. "You all right?" Elias glanced over. "Fine." She forced herself to stand straight, ignoring the trembling in her thighs. "You're not fine, but you're stubborn. I can work with that." He pulled a bedroll from his pack. "Sit down before you fall down. I'll handle the horses." "I can help. Sit." The word wasn't quite an order, but it wasn't a suggestion either. Clara's pride warred with her exhaustion. Exhaustion won. She lowered herself onto a flat rock, biting back a groan as her muscles protested. Elias worked quickly and efficiently, unsaddling both horses, checking their hooves, leading them to the creek to drink. He moved like someone who'd done this 10,000 times, every motion economical and precise. The dying sunlight caught the scars on his hands, dozens of them, layered like a map of violence. "You're staring," he said, without looking at her. Clara jerked her eyes away. "Sorry." "Don't apologize. You're wondering what kind of man you just rode off with. That's smart." He finished with the horses and started gathering deadwood. "Ask me anything you want. Better to know now than wonder." "How old are you?" 36. You? 19. You already knew that. Wanted to hear you say it. He arranged the wood in a small depression between rocks. Makes it real, talking. Clara watched him strike flint against steel. Sparks caught in dry grass he'd shredded with his fingers. Within minutes, he had a small fire going. The efficiency of it was almost frightening. "Where did you learn to do all this?" she asked. "Mountains teach you or kill you? Not much middle ground." He pulled out a metal pot and filled it from the creek. "I was 15 when I headed west. Figured I'd trap beaver, make my fortune, be rich by 20. Turned out the beaver were mostly gone and the mountains were harder than I thought." "But you survived." Obviously, a ghost of humor crossed his face. "Though there were a few times it was close. Starved through my first winter. Got mauled by a grizzly my second year. Fell through ice my third. After a while you learn the rules or you die." He produced dried meat from his pack and a small sack of cornmeal. Clara's stomach growled traitorously loud. "When did you last eat?" Elias asked. "Yesterday morning. We've been rationing." His jaw tightened. He dumped cornmeal into the pot of water, added salt from a leather pouch, set it over the fire. "We'll eat in 20 minutes. In the meantime, there's a flat spot behind those rocks where you can wash up if you want. Creek's cold, but it's clean." "You're not going to watch me?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Elias looked at her directly for the first time since they'd made camp. His storm gray eyes were unreadable. "I gave you my word. I meant it. Men say a lot of things they don't mean. I'm not most men." He turned back to the fire. "You'll figure that out eventually, or you won't. Either way, I'm not going to do anything you don't want me to do. That clear enough?" Clara studied his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the scars disappearing into his beard, the way firelight turned his features into something carved from stone. He looked like something out of a child's nightmare story about monsters in the woods. But he'd paid her family's debt. He'd given her a choice, and now he was making her dinner. "I'll be back," she said quietly. The water was ice cold and made her gasp, but it felt good to wash away the dust and sweat. Clara scrubbed her face and arms, trying to process the fact that this morning she'd woken up in her own bed And now she was camped in the wilderness with a man who was technically her husband, except they weren't married. Not really. That would require a ceremony, a preacher, witnesses. What they had was an arrangement, a business deal. She touched the wooden sparrow in her pocket again. When she returned to the fire, Elias had the cornmeal mush ready in 2 tin bowls. He'd mixed in the dried meat and what looked like wild onions. It wasn't fancy, but it was hot and filling, and Clara ate like she hadn't seen food in a week. "Slow down," Elias said. "You'll make yourself sick. Can't help it. This is good." "It's mush." "It's food." Clara scraped the last bit from her bowl. "We've been living on chicken eggs and whatever greens my mother could grow. Having meat again feels like—" She trailed off. "Like being human?" "Yeah." They sat in silence while the fire crackled and night settled over the prairie. Stars emerged overhead, more than Clara had ever seen. Without the light from even a distant town, the sky looked almost crowded with them. "Do you ever get lonely?" The question slipped out before Clara could stop it. "Out in the mountains by yourself?" Elias took a long time to answer. "Yeah, every day." "Then why stay?" "Because out there, I know the rules. I know what wants to kill me and why. Out here," he gestured vaguely toward civilization, "people smile while they sharpen knives. They make promises they never keep. They take and take until there's nothing left." His voice went flat. "I'll take an honest grizzly over a dishonest man any day." "Is that what happened to you? Someone broke a promise?" "Lots of someones. Starting with my own father." Elias poked the fire with a stick. "He ran a freight business in St. Louis. Did well for himself. When I was 14, he got into some bad investments. Lost everything. His solution was to sell his labor contracts to a mining operation in Colorado, including me." Clara's breath caught. "He sold you?" "Indentured servitude. Legal as sunshine. I was supposed to work the mines for 7 years to pay his debts." Elias's laugh was bitter. "Lasted 6 months before I decided dying in a cave-in wasn't how I wanted to spend my life. So I ran. Been running ever since, I guess." "That's why you understood. When Hale tried to take me, that's why I couldn't let it happen." He met her eyes across the fire. "Nobody should be sold to pay someone else's debts. Not you, not me, not anybody." They fell silent again. Clara pulled her thin shawl tighter as the temperature dropped. Elias noticed and wordlessly handed her a thick wool blanket from his pack. "You'll freeze," she protested. "I've got the bear coat. You need it more." The blanket smelled like wood smoke and pine and something wild she couldn't identify. Clara wrapped it around herself and felt warmth seep into her bones for the first time since leaving home. "We should sleep," Elias said. "I want to cover 20 miles tomorrow, and that means starting early." He spread his bedroll on one side of the fire. Clara stared at hers, suddenly aware that she'd be sleeping in the open wilderness with a man she barely knew. Every survival instinct her mother had drilled into her started screaming warnings. "I'm not going to touch you," Elias said without looking up. "Fire's between us. You'll hear if I move. And if it makes you feel safer—" He pulled the massive knife from his belt and laid it on the ground halfway between them. "That's yours tonight. You know which end goes into a man if he tries something." Clara looked at the blade gleaming in the firelight. "You're giving me a weapon? Seems fair. I've got 3 more." He settled into his bedroll, pulling the bear coat over himself. "Get some sleep, Clara. Tomorrow's going to be harder than today." She didn't think she'd be able to sleep at all, but exhaustion dragged her under within minutes. Her last conscious thought was that the knife remained untouched between them. The days blurred together into an exhausting rhythm of riding, camping, and riding again. Clara's body slowly adapted to the constant movement, her hands developing calluses, her legs growing stronger. Elias kept them moving north and west, following trails that often weren't trails at all, just paths he seemed to know by instinct. He didn't talk much, but when he did, Clara found herself listening carefully. He taught her which plants were safe to eat and which would kill her within hours, how to read weather in the color of clouds, how to tell if water was safe to drink by watching where animals congregated. "Why are you teaching me this?" she asked on the 4th day as he showed her how to identify wolf tracks. "Because if something happens to me, you need to be able to survive." The casual way he said it made Clara's stomach twist. "What could happen to you?" Horse breaks a leg and kicks me in the head. Snake bite. Fall off a cliff. Get shot by a hunter who mistakes me for game. He shrugged. Mountains are dangerous. Always good to have backup plans. That's cheerful. That's reality. He pointed to a depression in the mud. See how the front pad is larger than the back? That's how you know it's a wolf print and not a dog. Dog prints are more symmetrical. And why does that matter? Because if you see wolf tracks that fresh, you find somewhere else to camp. Wolves aren't usually a problem, but during a hard winter, they'll take what they can get, including you. Clara stared at the print. Have you ever had to fight wolves? Twice. Lost some toes to frostbite the second time. He started walking again. Come on, want to make the next water source before dark. That night, they camped near a wide stream where the water ran fast over smooth stones. Elias caught 3 fish with his bare hands in the time it took Clara to gather firewood, moving so quickly through the shallows that the trout didn't see him coming until his hands closed around them. Show off, Clara muttered. He almost smiled. You want to learn? To catch fish with my hands? It's a useful skill. I'll stick to fishing poles, thanks. But the next evening, when they camped near another stream, Clara found herself wading into the shallows while Elias talked her through it. Stay still. Don't make shadows. Let the fish come to you. Feel for movement with your fingers. She spent an hour trying and failed every time. Her hands were numb from the cold water and her pride was bruised by the time she finally gave up. This is impossible. It takes practice. I've been doing it for 20 years. Elias handed her a towel to dry her hands. You almost had that last one. Almost doesn't feed anybody. No, but trying does. Most people won't even try. Clara looked at him, really looked at him. In the fading light, with his guard slightly lowered, she could see past the scars and the beard to something almost human underneath. Were you always this patient? No. The mountains beat it into me. He started cleaning the fish he'd caught while she struggled. When I first came out here, I thought I knew everything. Thought I was smarter than everyone else, tougher than the wilderness. Nearly died a dozen times before I figured out the mountains don't care how tough you think you are. What changed? I did. Had to. His knife moved in quick, practiced strokes. Pride keeps you warm until it gets you killed. I learned to listen, watch, adapt. The animals that survive up here aren't the strongest or the meanest. They're the ones that pay attention. Is that what you're doing with me? Teaching me to pay attention? I'm teaching you to survive. Because come winter, the bitterroots don't forgive mistakes. The word sent a chill through Clara that had nothing to do with the cold water. She was beginning to understand what she'd actually agreed to. Not just marriage to a stranger, but life in a place that would kill her the moment she stopped being vigilant. On the 8th day, they reached the foothills. The land had been gradually rising, prairie giving way to scrub brush and scattered pines. Now the mountains loomed ahead of them, massive, dark, and utterly indifferent to human presence. Clara had never felt so small. The bitterroots, Elias said, stopping his horse at the crest of a ridge. Home. They're enormous. We're only going into the northern section. My valley's about 60 miles in, elevation around 7,000 feet. Takes another week to get there. A week of climbing. Mostly, some of it's pretty steep. He glanced at her. You holding up all right? Clara wanted to lie, but her body told the truth. She was exhausted, sore, and scared, but she was also stubborn. I'll make it. Never doubted that. He urged his horse forward. Come on, want to reach the first shelter before nightfall. The shelter turned out to be a small cave tucked into a rock face, barely large enough for 2 people and the horses. Elias had stocked it years ago with firewood and supplies wrapped in oilcloth. Everything was still there, dry and ready to use. You have these all over the mountains? Clara asked. Got 5 of them on the route between here and my cabin. Makes the trip manageable. He started a fire in the cave's natural alcove. Storms can hit fast up here. Having shelter already set up saves lives. That night was colder than any before. Even with the fire and the blankets, Clara shivered in the thin mountain air. She woke sometime after midnight to find Elias adding wood to the flames. Can't sleep? She asked quietly. Don't need much. 4 hours does me fine. He sat back down, the bear coat pulled tight around him. You should rest. Tomorrow's a hard climb. I'm too cold to sleep. Without a word, Elias took off the bear coat and handed it to her. What? No, you'll freeze. I've got other layers. You don't. When she hesitated, he added, Take it, Clara. I'm not being chivalrous. I'm being practical. Can't have you getting frostbite before we even reach the cabin. She accepted the coat reluctantly. It was impossibly heavy and warm, the fur thick and soft against her skin. It smelled like Elias, wood smoke and leather and mountain air. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. Just sleep. But Clara found herself watching him instead. He sat with his back against the cave wall, his rifle across his knees, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the fire's light. Standing guard, protecting her even when he thought she wasn't looking. Can I ask you something? She said. Why did you really do this? The truth. Elias was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, you want the practical reason or the real one? Both. Practical reason. I meant what I said. I'm tired of being alone. Winters are long up here. Having someone to talk to cook with, to share the work. It makes sense. And the real reason? He looked at her then, the firelight turning his eyes copper. Because when I pulled you out of that river, you looked at me like I was a person. Not a problem, not a resource, not something to use. A person. His voice went rough. I was 16 years old and nobody had looked at me like that in 2 years. Not since my father sold me. You smiled at me while I carved that bird, and you said thank you like you meant it, like I mattered. Clara felt her throat tighten. I know it sounds pathetic, Elias continued, building a whole fantasy around a little girl who was kind to me one time. But I never forgot that moment, never forgot your face. And when I heard what Hale was planning, his hands clenched. I couldn't let him take that person and break her into something else. So I bought you free. And yeah, maybe I'm selfish for asking you to marry me instead. Maybe I'm no better than him in my own way. But at least with me, you get to choose. That's not pathetic, Clara said quietly. That's lonely. Same thing most days. She pulled the bear coat tighter around herself. I don't remember you very well, just bits and pieces. But I remember feeling safe, even though I'd almost died, even though I was freezing and scared. I felt safe with you. You were a kid. Kids trust easy. Maybe. But I'm not a kid anymore, and I still feel it. The admission surprised her. I should be terrified of you. Everyone else would be. But I'm not. I don't know why. You're smarter than I thought then. You should be scared. I'm not a good man, Clara. I've killed people. More than one. I've done things I'm not proud of. So have most people in the territories. You think my father hasn't killed? You think anyone survives out here without getting blood on their hands? Clara shifted closer to the fire. The difference is you're honest about it. You don't pretend to be civilized. That's supposed to be a compliment? It's an observation. Elias shook his head slowly. You're strange. You know that? Takes one to know one. That pulled a real laugh from him, short and rusty, like it surprised him as much as it surprised her. The sound made him look younger somehow, less like a scarred predator and more like the teenage boy who'd saved a drowning girl. Get some sleep, he said, but his voice was warmer now. We've got a mountain to climb tomorrow. Clara finally closed her eyes, wrapped in the bear coat, listening to the fire crackle and Elias's steady breathing. For the first time since leaving home, she didn't dream about Dust Creek or her parents' worried faces. She dreamed about mountains and rivers and wooden birds. The climb took 5 days. 5 brutal, exhausting days of narrow trails and steep switchbacks, of leading the horses by hand through sections too dangerous to ride, of camping on ledges barely wide enough for their bedrolls. Clara's fear of heights developed on the second day and got worse every hour after that. Don't look down, Elias told her for the 100th time as they navigated a particularly narrow section. Eyes on the path, nothing else. Easy for you to say. You're not afraid of falling. Who says I'm not afraid? I'm just good at not showing it. He glanced back at her. Fear's useful, keeps you careful. It's panic that kills people. What's the difference? Fear makes you check your footing. Panic makes you run. He reached a wider section and stopped, waiting for her. You're doing fine. I'm terrified. I know, but you're still moving. That's what matters. On the 4th day of climbing, a storm rolled in faster than Elias expected. One moment the sky was clear, the next it was dark with clouds that turned the afternoon into twilight. Rain came down in sheets, turning the trail into slick mud. "We need to find shelter," Elias shouted over the wind. "Where?" "There's an overhang about a mile ahead. Can you make it?" Clara's dress was plastered to her skin, her hands numb from cold. The path had become a stream, water flowing downhill and making every step treacherous. But she nodded because what else was she going to do? They made it halfway when Clara's horse lost its footing. The animal screamed, hooves sliding in the mud, and for one terrible second Clara thought they were both going over the edge. She threw herself sideways, hitting the cliff face hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. The horse regained its footing, trembling and wild-eyed, but alive. Elias was there in seconds, grabbing the horse's reins with one hand and Clara's arm with the other. "You hurt?" "No, just scared." "Good. Use it." He pulled her to her feet. "We keep moving. Storm's going to get worse before it gets better." The overhang turned out to be barely more than a shallow indentation in the rock, but it was enough to break the wind. Elias got a fire going somehow, despite the wet wood, coaxing flames from what should have been impossible. He stripped off Clara's soaked shawl and wrapped her in dry blankets from his waterproof pack. "You need to get out of that wet dress," he said. "I don't have another one." "Then wrap yourself in the blankets. That dress is pulling heat from your body." Clara's teeth chattered too hard to argue. She turned her back and struggled out of the wet fabric, wrapping herself in the blankets while trying to preserve some modesty. When she turned around, Elias was pointedly looking the other direction, giving her privacy she hadn't asked for. "You can look now," she said. He turned back, his expression carefully neutral. "Better? Warmer. Thank you." They huddled by the small fire while the storm raged outside, so close their shoulders almost touched. Clara could feel the heat radiating from Elias's body, could hear his steady breathing over the sound of rain. "Tell me about your cabin," she said, desperate for distraction from the cold. "What's it like?" "It's solid. 2 rooms, stone fireplace, good roof that doesn't leak. I built it myself over 3 summers, hauling rocks from the river and cutting logs one at a time." His voice carried a note of pride. "Got a stable for the horses, a shed for storing meat and supplies, small vegetable garden that actually produces sometimes." "What do you grow?" "Potatoes mostly, carrots, onions, things that can handle the short growing season. There's wild berries all through the valley in summer, raspberries, choke cherries, service berries, and the hunting's good. Elk, deer, sometimes moose. Never go hungry if you know what you're doing." "It sounds lonely." "It is, but it's beautiful too. The valley's shaped like a bowl with mountains on all sides. There's a lake fed by snowmelt that's so clear you can see 20 feet down. In fall, the aspens turn gold and it looks like the whole mountain's on fire." He paused. "You'll see soon enough. We'll be there day after tomorrow if this storm clears." Clara tried to imagine it, a hidden valley, a cabin built by hand, a life measured in seasons instead of social calendars and cotton prices. It sounded like something from a fairy tale, the kind where the girl gets locked in a tower, or the kind where she finds out the beast was human all along. "Are you scared?" Elias asked suddenly, "of being alone with me once we get there?" Clara considered lying, but decided on honesty. "A little. Not of you exactly. More of the isolation. What if I hate it? What if I can't handle it? Then I bring you back in spring like I promised. No shame in trying something and deciding it's not for you." He fed another stick to the fire. "But Clara, you've handled everything so far. The ride, the climb. That horse losing its footing today. You didn't panic. You didn't quit. That tells me you're stronger than you think, or too stubborn to know when to quit. Same thing in the mountains." The storm finally broke around midnight. Claire had dozed off against Elias's shoulder without meaning to, and when she woke, his arm was around her. Not intimate, just practical, sharing warmth. She started to pull away, then realized he was asleep too, his head tilted back against the rock, his breathing deep and even. She studied his face in the dying firelight. Without the constant vigilance he maintained while awake, he looked younger, more vulnerable. The scars were still there, the weathered skin, the hard line of his jaw. But there was something almost peaceful in his expression. Clara thought about her mother's warning, about running if he hurt her, about not trusting too easily. But Elias had kept every promise so far. He'd protected her, fed her, taught her. given her space when she needed it. He could have taken advantage a dozen times and hadn't. That had to mean something. Maybe he really was just what he claimed to be, a lonely man trying to build a life with someone who'd once been kind to him. Or maybe she was a fool for believing it. Clara closed her eyes and let herself lean against his warmth. She'd find out soon enough which story she was living. The final day of climbing brought them over the last ridge and down into a valley that stole Clara's breath. Elias hadn't lied. It was beautiful. A bowl of green tucked between granite peaks, with a lake so blue it looked artificial. Aspens clustered along the valley floor, their leaves just beginning to turn gold. A river cut through the center, catching sunlight like a ribbon of silver. And there, tucked against the northern slope, was a cabin. "That's it?" Clara asked. "That's home." They descended slowly, the horses picking their way down a trail that showed signs of regular use. As they got closer, Clara could see the details Elias had described. The stone chimney, the solid log walls, the covered porch. Smoke rose from the chimney. "Wait," she said. "There's smoke. Is someone in your cabin?" Elias's hand went to his rifle. "Stay behind me." They approached carefully, but before they reached the porch, the door opened and a woman stepped out. She was maybe 50, weather-worn and lean, with gray hair in 2 long braids and skin darkened by sun and wind. She wore buckskin and had a rifle in her hands, not pointed at them, but ready. "Elias Mercer," she called out. "About time you showed up. Been keeping your fire going for 2 days." Elias relaxed. "Blue Crow woman. Didn't expect to see you until next month. Your smoke signals said you were bringing a wife. Thought I'd make sure the place was ready." The woman's dark eyes shifted to Clara, assessing. "This her?" "This is Clara. Clara, this is Blue Crow woman. She's Salish. Her people have a winter camp about 10 miles north of here." Blue Crow woman set her rifle aside and approached Clara directly. She looked her up and down with the same thorough assessment Elias had given the horses. "You look half-starved and completely exhausted," she said bluntly. "But you made it over the pass in one piece, so maybe you're not as soft as you look. Can you cook?" "Yes," Clara said. "So?" "Yes." "Shoot a rifle?" "No." "Then that's what he'll teach you first. Can't survive a winter up here without knowing how to protect yourself." Blue Crow woman turned to Elias. "I left venison stew on your stove and fresh bread. Your garden produced some squash. I harvested them before the frost got them." "You didn't have to do that." "No, but I did anyway. Call it a wedding gift." She collected her rifle and a small pack from inside. "I'll leave you two alone. Clara, don't let him forget you're human. Mountain men get strange when they're alone too long. You need anything? Follow the river north for 2 hours. Our camp is in the meadow where the river forks." "Thank you," Clara managed. Blue Crow woman nodded once and disappeared into the trees, moving silently despite the dry leaves. Clara and Elias stood in the clearing, suddenly alone. The cabin waited. The valley spread around them, beautiful and isolated and completely cut off from everything Clara had ever known. "Well," Elias said quietly, "welcome home." He offered his hand. Clara looked at it for a long moment, scarred and calloused and steady, then took it. Together, they walked toward the cabin door. The inside of the cabin was nothing like Clara expected. She'd braced herself for a dark, filthy cave where a man had lived alone for 15 years. Instead, she found order, cleanliness, care. The main room held a stone fireplace with a proper mantel, a handmade table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies and labeled jars, and a rocking chair positioned near the hearth. Sunlight streamed through real glass windows, expensive, hard to transport, and utterly unexpected. The floor was swept clean. The venison stew Blue Crow woman mentioned simmered over the fire, filling the space with rich, savory smell. A doorway led to a smaller second room. Clara glimpsed a bed frame, a trunk, a washstand. "It's clean," she said, then immediately felt stupid for sounding so surprised. Elias set down their packs. "I'm not an animal. I just look like one." He moved to the stove, checking the stew. "You can have the bedroom. I'll sleep out here." "That's your bed. And now it's yours. I've slept on worse than a floor." He ladled stew into 2 bowls. "Eat first. Then I'll show you around." They ate in silence. Clara kept glancing around, trying to reconcile this comfortable, well-maintained home with the savage mountain man who'd bought her freedom. Nothing fit the story she'd been telling herself. "You built all this yourself?" she finally asked. "Most of it. Blue Crow Woman's husband helped with the chimney, traded him furs for the labor." Elias sopped up stew with bread. "The furniture I made during the winters. Not much else to do when you're snowed in for months." "The windows must have cost a fortune." "They did. Took me 3 years of trapping to save enough." He met her eyes. "But I wanted real windows. Wanted to see the valley even when I couldn't go outside. Seemed worth it." Clara looked at the glass reflecting sunlight, at the careful construction, at the little touches that turned a shelter into a home. "You were planning this, for years. Building a place for 2 people even though you were alone. Hope's a strange thing, keeps you going even when it's stupid." "It's not stupid. Tell me that in January when we've been stuck inside for 6 weeks straight, and you're ready to murder me." But there was something almost warm in his voice. After they ate, Elias showed her around. The stable behind the cabin held 2 stalls, fresh hay already laid down. The storage shed was packed with dried meat, sacks of grain, barrels of preserves. The root cellar dug into the hillside contained potatoes, carrots, onions, and squash. "This is enough food for an army," Clara said. "It's enough for 2 people to survive a hard winter with some left over for emergencies." Elias checked the meat hanging in the shed. "We'll need more before the snow comes. I'll go hunting next week. Elk if I can find them, deer if not." "Can I come with you?" He looked at her sharply. "You've never hunted." "Then teach me. You said I need to learn to shoot anyway." "Shooting targets and shooting animals are different things." "I'm not squeamish. We butchered chickens at home." Elias studied her face for a long moment. "All right. But first you learn the rifle. Can't have you coming along if you're more likely to shoot me than the elk." That afternoon, he brought out a Winchester repeater and walked Clara to a clearing where he'd set up a makeshift range. Pieces of wood propped against a fallen log at varying distances. "This is a 73 model," he explained, handling the rifle with practiced ease. "Holds 15 rounds. It'll kick harder than you expect, so brace yourself. Put the stock tight against your shoulder, not loose. Loose will bruise you." He demonstrated the stance, the aim, the breathing. When he fired, the crack echoed off the mountains, and the farthest target exploded into splinters. "Your turn." Clara took the rifle. It was heavier than she expected, the metal cold against her palms. She tried to copy Elias's stance, but when she pulled the trigger, the recoil slammed into her shoulder so hard she staggered backward. Her shot went wide, hitting nothing. "Too tense," Elias said. "You're fighting the rifle instead of working with it. Try again." She fired 6 more times. Missed every single shot. Her shoulder throbbed and her ears rang and frustration burned in her throat. "This is impossible." "It's your first day. I've been shooting since I was 12. Elias adjusted her grip. "Here, feel how I'm positioning your hands? The rifle becomes part of your body, not something separate. Don't muscle it. Let it rest naturally." His hands were warm over hers, guiding without forcing. Clara tried to focus on the lesson instead of how close he was standing, how steady his breathing was against her back. "Now aim," he said quietly. "Don't think too hard. Just see the target and squeeze." She fired. The bullet hit the log 6 inches left of the target. "Better," Elias said. "I still missed." "But you hit the log. That's progress." He stepped back. "Keep practicing. Aim for the closest target. I'll get dinner started." Clara spent the next hour shooting until her shoulder ached and her hands trembled. She hit the log 4 more times, but never the actual target. By the time Elias called her back to the cabin, she was exhausted and discouraged. "Don't look so defeated," he said as she slumped into a chair. "You hit the log. First day? That's good. You said you needed me to hit targets, not logs." "I also said it takes practice." He handed her a tin cup of water. "You'll get there. You're stubborn enough." Over the next week, they fell into a routine that felt almost normal. Clara woke at dawn to find Elias already up, stoking the fire, making coffee. They ate breakfast together, then went to work. He taught her to shoot, to track, to read the forest. She took over cooking and mending, tasks that felt familiar even in this strange new life. Blue Crow Woman visited twice, bringing gifts, a pair of sturdy boots that actually fit Clara, a warm coat made from rabbit fur, and advice that ranged from helpful to brutally honest. "He's teaching you to shoot?" she asked, watching Clara practice. "Trying to. I'm terrible at it. Everyone's terrible at first, but you'll learn or you'll die, so might as well learn. Blue Crow Woman settled onto a stump. How are you two getting along otherwise? Fine. He's different than I expected. Different how? Clara struggled to put it into words. Quieter. Kinder. I thought he'd be more... She gestured vaguely. More like a man who lives alone in the mountains and looks like he eats children for breakfast? Yes. Blue Crow Woman laughed. Elias has always been gentle under all that fur and scar tissue. It's why he left civilization. He's too soft for the world down there, and he knows it. Up here, he can be himself without people trying to take advantage. That's sad. That's survival. We all find the places we fit. She watched Clara fire another shot that went wide. You fit better than you know. Most city women would have run screaming by now. I'm not a city woman, and I promised him one winter. Is that still all you're planning? One winter? Clara didn't answer. The truth was, she didn't know anymore. This life was hard and isolated and nothing like what she'd imagined for herself. But it was also peaceful in a way she'd never experienced. No debts, no Victor Hales, no slow starvation under a merciless sun, just mountains and work, and a man who treated her with more respect than anyone back home except her own father. I don't know, she admitted. Well, you've got all winter to figure it out. Blue Crow Woman stood. I'll come back in 2 weeks. By then, you better be hitting those targets. October turned to November. The aspens blazed gold and then dropped their leaves. Frost came earlier each morning, staying longer. Clara's shooting improved slowly. She could hit the close targets now, sometimes even the middle-distance ones. Elias took her hunting for the first time on a cold morning when their breath came out in clouds. They tracked a young buck for 3 hours before Elias deemed it a good shot. He positioned Clara, adjusted her stance, whispered instructions about breathing and patience and not rushing. When she fired, the buck dropped. Clara stared at it lying in the frost-covered grass, suddenly aware that she'd just killed something. Her hands started shaking. First time's always hard, Elias said quietly. You did good. Clean shot. He didn't suffer. I killed him. You fed us. There's a difference. He moved to the deer. Come on. I'll show you how to field dress it. Part of hunting is respecting what you take. The process was bloody and difficult, and Clara's stomach turned more than once. But Elias talked her through it with patience, explaining each step, each cut, treating the animal with a reverence that surprised her. We use everything, he said. Meat for eating, hide for leather, bones for tools. Nothing wasted. That's the deal. What deal? Between us and the mountain, it provides, we respect what it gives. Balance. They hauled the deer back to the cabin where Elias taught Clara to butcher properly, to cut steaks and roasts and stew meat, to render fat and scrape hide. It took all day. By the time they finished, Clara's arms ached and she smelled like blood and iron. But they had meat, enough to last weeks. That night they ate fresh venison steaks with roasted potatoes from the garden. Clara had cooked them herself over the fire, seasoned with wild herbs Elias had shown her how to identify. It was simple food, but it tasted like accomplishment. You did good today, Elias said. I threw up twice while we were gutting it. But you didn't quit. That's what matters. He cut another piece of steak. Most people can't handle their first kill. The fact that you did it anyway shows strength. I'm not strong. I'm just stubborn. Same thing. He almost smiled. You remind me of myself when I first came out here, determined to prove I could survive even when everything seemed impossible. Did you ever want to quit? Every day the first year? Every single day. He stared into the fire. But I had nowhere else to go. So I stayed, learned, adapted. Eventually it stopped feeling like survival and started feeling like living. When did that happen? Honestly, today might be the first day I can say it without lying. Clara looked at him across the table. He met her eyes, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. Two people who'd been forced into impossible situations and somehow found their way through. Thank you, she said quietly. For teaching me. For being patient. Thank you for trying, for not giving up. He cleared their plates. Storm's coming tomorrow. Big one, based on how the animals are acting. We should prepare. The storm hit at midnight with winds that made the cabin shake. Snow came sideways, piling against the door and coating the windows in white. Clara woke to the sound of wood groaning and wind howling like wolves. She found Elias already up, checking the fire, making sure everything was secure. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad enough. We'll be snowed in for a few days at least." He added wood to the fire. "Welcome to winter in the bitter roots." The storm lasted 3 days. Snow piled 6 feet high outside, blocking the door completely. Elias had to dig a tunnel just to reach the stable and care for the horses. The world became small and white and impossibly cold. Clara learned what isolation really meant. There was no going outside, no neighbors to visit, no town to ride to. Just the cabin, the fire, and Elias. They played cards with a worn deck he kept in a drawer. She read Shakespeare aloud while he carved wood by the fireplace. They cooked together, worked together, existed in the same small space without stepping on each other's toes. On the 3rd day, cabin fever set in. "I need to move," Clara said, pacing the length of the room for the 100th time. "I can't just sit here anymore." "Snow's still too deep to go anywhere." "Then I'll dig. I'll do something. I can't just—" She gestured helplessly. Elias set down his carving. "Come here." "What?" "I'm going to teach you to fight." Clara blinked. "Fight?" "You're restless. I'm restless. Might as well channel it into something useful." He moved furniture aside, creating space. Blue Crow Woman was right. You need to know how to protect yourself. Not just with a rifle. Sometimes threats get too close for shooting. For the next hour, Elias taught her basic defensive moves. How to break a grip. Where to strike to disable an attacker. How to use momentum against someone larger and stronger. He was careful, patient, never using more force than necessary. But Clara could feel the controlled strength in every movement, the coiled violence he kept locked down tight. "You're holding back," she said, breathing hard. "Of course I am. I don't want to hurt you. But in a real fight, someone would hurt me. So how do I know if I'm actually learning anything?" Elias hesitated. "You want me to stop holding back?" "Not completely, but enough that I know what it feels like." "All right, try to break my grip." He caught her wrist, not gently, but not brutal either. Clara tried the technique he'd taught her, but his hand didn't budge. She tried again, putting her whole body into it. Nothing. "You're trying to out-muscle me," Elias said. "That won't work. I've got 80 pounds on you and 15 years of fighting experience. Use technique, use angles." Clara adjusted her approach, focusing on the mechanics of the movement instead of pure strength. This time, when she twisted, his grip loosened. Not much, but enough. "Better," he said. They practiced until Clara was sweating despite the cold, until her muscles burned and her breathing came ragged. When Elias finally called a halt, she collapsed into the rocking chair. "That was harder than shooting," she gasped. "Fighting always is, but you're learning." He handed her water. "You've got good instincts. You just need to trust them more." "My instincts told me to run from you when we first met." "And did you?" "No." "Why not?" Clara thought about it. "Because running would have meant going back to Hale, and that seemed worse than taking a chance on you." "That's not much of a compliment." "It's honest." She drank the water. "You asked me to trust my instincts. My instincts say you're dangerous, but not to me. Is that right?" Elias was quiet for a long time. "Yes," he finally said. "Never to you." The storm broke on the 4th day. Elias dug them out while Clara made breakfast. When she finally stepped outside, the world had transformed into something alien and beautiful. White everywhere, snow-covered peaks gleaming under brilliant sun, the lake frozen solid and reflecting light like a mirror. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It's deadly." Elias pointed to the tree line. "See those tracks? Mountain lion. Came right up to the stable last night. That's why the horses were nervous." Clara's wonder evaporated. "How close did it get?" "Close enough." He checked his rifle. "It'll be back. They always come back when they're hungry." "What do we do?" "We prepare. Make sure the stable's secure. Keep the rifle loaded. Stay alert." He looked at her seriously. "This is what I meant about the mountains not forgiving mistakes. That cat is hungry and desperate. If it decides we're food, it won't hesitate." That night, Clara woke to a sound that froze her blood. A scream, Not human, not quite animal. Something between the two. The horses were going wild in the stable, crashing against their stalls. She grabbed the rifle Elias had made her keep beside the bed and ran into the main room. Elias was already at the door, his own rifle in hand. "Stay inside," he ordered. "Like hell." "Clara, you said I need to learn to protect myself. Well, I'm learning." She checked the rifle's load. "What is it?" "Mountain lion. Big one, sounds like." He cracked the door. "It's trying to get into the stable." Another scream from outside. The horse's panic was audible even through the walls. "We have to save them," Clara said. "I know." Elias grabbed a torch, lit it from the fire. "You cover me from the porch. If you see the cat, shoot it. Don't hesitate, don't aim for a perfect shot, just shoot, understood?" Understood. They moved out into the freezing night. The snow was knee-deep, and the temperature had dropped so far Clara's breath froze in her lungs. The torch cast wild shadows across the clearing. The mountain lion stood between them and the stable, enormous, tawny, muscles rippling under winter-thin fur. Its eyes reflected the torchlight like copper coins. Blood stained its muzzle from where it had tried to claw through the stable door. "Back away slow," Elias said, his voice calm. "Don't run. Don't turn your back." The cat's tail lashed. It crouched lower. "Elias," Clara whispered, "it's going to charge." "I know. When it does, I need you to shoot. Can you do that?" "Yes." The mountain lion screamed again and launched itself at Elias. Clara fired. The shot went wide, but it was enough to make the cat twist mid-leap. Elias's rifle boomed, catching the animal in the shoulder. It hit the ground, rolled, came up snarling. Blood darkened the snow. Clara fired again. This time she hit it, somewhere in the body she couldn't tell where. The cat staggered. Elias fired a third time. The mountain lion dropped and didn't get up. Silence fell over the clearing, broken only by the horse's continued panic and Clara's ragged breathing. "You all right?" Elias asked, not taking his eyes off the cat. "I think so. You?" "Fine." He approached the lion carefully, rifle ready. When he was sure it was dead, he looked back at Clara. "You hit it center mass, second shot. That's good shooting under pressure." Clara stared at the dead animal, at the blood spreading across white snow, at her own hand still gripping the rifle. She'd just killed something that was trying to kill them. No hesitation, no mercy, just survival. "I should feel worse about this," she said. "But you don't?" "No, it was trying to kill our horses. Maybe us. So I killed it first." She met Elias's eyes. "Does that make me a bad person?" "It makes you someone who understands the mountain." He walked to her, gently took the rifle. "Come on, let's check on the horses, then get back inside. You're shaking." She was, but not from cold or fear. From adrenaline, from the realization of what she'd just done, from the sudden understanding that she'd crossed some invisible line. She wasn't the terrified girl who'd left Dust Creek anymore. She was someone who could pull a trigger when it mattered. The horses were unharmed, but traumatized. Elias calmed them while Clara leaned against the stable wall, processing. When he finished, he found her still standing there, staring at nothing. "Hey," he said softly. "Talk to me. I'm different now. I can feel it. Something changed. You grew up. That's allowed. I killed something tonight, and I'd do it again without hesitation." "Good. That means you'll survive." He pulled her toward the cabin. "But you're still shaking, and your lips are turning blue. Inside. Now." Back in the warmth, Elias made tea while Clara wrapped herself in blankets. Her hand still trembled as she held the cup. "The first time I killed something that wasn't food, I threw up for an hour," Elias said, settling into the chair across from her. "I was 17. 3 men tried to rob me on the trail. I shot one of them, watched him die. Couldn't eat for 2 days after." "What changed?" "I realized something. Feeling bad about it meant I wasn't a monster. But surviving it meant I was strong enough to do what needed doing." He sipped his tea. "You're allowed to have both feelings, Clara. You can hate that you had to kill that cat and still be glad you did it. That's called being human." Clara thought about that. About the wooden sparrow in her pocket. About the girl who'd almost drowned. About the woman who'd just saved her own life. Maybe Elias was right. Maybe being human meant holding contradictions without breaking. "Will it get easier?" she asked. "Some things do. Some things don't. You just learn to carry it better." They sat in silence while the fire crackled and the wind howled outside. Clara felt exhausted down to her bones, but also more alive than she'd ever been. The mountain had tested her tonight. She'd passed. That had to count for something. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For teaching me. For trusting me with the rifle. For not treating me like I'm fragile." "You were never fragile, just untested." Elias set down his cup. "Now you know what you're capable of. That's worth more than gold up here." Clara finished her tea and stood. Her legs felt unsteady, but she made it to the bedroom doorway before turning back. "Elias? Yeah? I'm glad it was you. At my family's farm that day. I'm glad it was you who showed up." Something in his expression softened. "Get some sleep, Clara. Tomorrow we'll skin that lion. Might as well make use of it." She closed the bedroom door and climbed into bed, still wearing most of her clothes for warmth. Through the wall, she could hear Elias moving around, banking the fire, checking the locks, protecting her even now. Clara touched the wooden sparrow on her nightstand. The boy who'd carved it had become the man keeping watch in the next room. The girl who'd received it had become someone who could face down a mountain lion without flinching. Maybe they were both exactly who they needed to be. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent and relentless. Winter had arrived in the Bitterroots, and Clara was still here, still breathing, still fighting, still choosing this life one day at a time. December brought snow that didn't stop. It fell day after day, piling against the cabin walls until Elias had to dig new tunnels every morning just to reach the stable. The world shrank to white and gray, and the occasional glimpse of dark trees through the blizzard. Clara learned what true isolation meant. No visitors, no change of scenery, just the cabin, the fire, and Elias. She thought she'd go mad from it, but something strange happened instead. The silence that had felt oppressive at first became comfortable. The routine they'd established turned into something almost like partnership. Elias would wake before dawn to tend the animals. Clara would have coffee and breakfast ready when he came back inside, snow crusted in his beard, fingers numb from cold. They'd eat together, then spend the day on whatever needed doing, mending tools, preserving food, maintaining their supplies, and talking. More than Clara had talked to anyone in years. "Tell me about St. Louis," she said one afternoon while mending one of his shirts. "Before your father lost everything." Elias looked up from the knife he was sharpening. "Why?" "Because I want to know. You know everything about me, my family, where I grew up, what my life was like. But you're still a mystery." He considered this, testing the blade's edge against his thumb. St. Louis was loud. That's what I remember most. Riverboats, dock workers, street vendors all shouting. Our house was near the waterfront, 3 stories, which seemed enormous to me then. My mother had a garden in the back where she grew roses. "What happened to her?" "Cholera, when I was 11. His voice went flat. "Half the neighborhood died that summer. The other half fled. My father buried her in the city cemetery and never spoke her name again." Clara's needle paused. "I'm sorry." It was a long time ago, but the way he said it suggested time hadn't healed that particular wound. After she died, my father threw himself into work, built the freight business from nothing, worked 18-hour days, made good money. I barely saw him. When I did, he was usually drunk. "Is that why you don't drink?" Elias looked at her sharply. "You noticed that? You haven't touched alcohol since we got here. Not even when Blue Crow Woman brought that bottle of whiskey." "Observant." He went back to sharpening. "Yeah, that's why. Watched what liquor did to my father, turned him mean, made him careless. Swore I'd never touch the stuff. Haven't broken that promise yet." "What was he like, before your mother died?" "Kinder. He used to take me to the docks on Sundays, show me the boats, explain how the business worked. He'd buy me candied nuts from a vendor who set up near the cathedral." Elias's hand stilled on the whetstone. "He wasn't a bad man exactly, just a weak one. When things got hard, he folded." "By selling you. By selling me." No emotion in his voice now, just statement of fact. "The mine owners came to him with an offer. They'd forgive his debts if he provided workers. Indentured servants, nice and legal. He signed the papers without blinking. Handed me over like I was cargo." Clara set down her mending. "How did you escape?" "Cave-in killed 3 men my second week there. While everyone was digging them out, I ran. Stole a horse, rode west, and never looked back." He tested the knife's edge again. Probably should feel guilty about the horse, but I don't. Did you ever try to contact him again? Once. Sent a letter from a trading post about 5 years after I left. Told him I was alive, told him to leave me alone. Never got a reply. Don't know if he's even still breathing. Do you want to know?
Elias thought about it. No, he made his choice. I made mine. We're both living with the consequences. Clara picked up her needle again, but didn't resume sewing. Is that how you see this? Us? As consequences? I see us as two people trying to survive winter. What it becomes after that? He shrugged. Guess we'll find out come spring.
The conversation sat heavy between them. Clara wanted to push, to ask what he wanted it to become, but fear held her tongue. What if his answer was different from what she was starting to hope for? When had that happened? When had this arrangement stopped feeling temporary? She couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. Maybe it was the morning she'd woken to find Elias had repaired her broken boots overnight. Maybe it was the evening he'd taught her to play chess, patient through her fumbling mistakes. Maybe it was the 100 small kindnesses he showed without expecting anything in return. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it was just the quiet comfort of existing beside someone who never demanded she be anything other than herself. Clara, Elias said, interrupting her thoughts. What? You're staring again. Sorry. She forced her attention back to the mending. Just thinking. About? Nothing important. He didn't press, which was another thing she appreciated about him. He never pushed for information she wasn't ready to give. That night, the temperature dropped so low that frost formed on the inside of the windows despite the roaring fire. Clara woke shivering even under 3 blankets. She could hear Elias moving around in the main room, feeding more wood to the fire. She got up, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and found him crouched by the hearth. Even with the flames blazing, his breath came out in visible puffs. How cold is it? She asked. Too cold. Thermometer outside reads 20 below. He added another log. This is bad. If it stays like this for more than a day or two, we could have problems. What kind of problems? Frozen pipes, frostbitten animals, wood supply running low because we're burning it faster than usual. He stood, brushing off his hands. Why are you up? Too cold to sleep. Come here. He gestured to the space in front of the fire. Warmest spot in the cabin. Clara settled beside him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from both Elias and the flames. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire dance. Tell me something, Elias said eventually. What did you think was going to happen when you agreed to come with me? Honestly? Honestly. Clara pulled the blanket tighter. I thought you'd wait until we were far enough from civilization, then show your true colors. Force yourself on me. Maybe kill me if I fought back. Leave my body in the mountains where no one would ever find it. She felt him tense beside her. That's what you believed? His voice was carefully controlled. It's what made sense. Men don't spend their life savings on strangers without wanting something in return. And now? You still think that's my plan? No. Clara looked at him directly. Now I think you're exactly what you claim to be. A lonely man who wanted company and was willing to pay for the chance at it, which is somehow sadder than if you'd just been a monster. Why sadder? Because monsters are simple. You fight them or run from them. But loneliness... She trailed off. Loneliness is complicated. It makes people do desperate things that aren't evil, just human. Elias was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. I used to tell myself I was fine alone, that I preferred it, that other people were the problem, not me. He stared into the flames. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of trusting someone who'd hurt me. Afraid of caring about someone who'd leave. So I hid up here and convinced myself it was a choice instead of a prison. What changed? I got tired of lying to myself. And then I heard Hale talking about you, and I realized something. He looked at her. I'd rather risk getting hurt than spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been. Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. That's a dangerous way to think. Everything worth having is dangerous. Is that what I am? Something worth having? You're someone worth knowing. Whether I get to have anything more than that is up to you. The honesty of it stole her breath. No games, no manipulation, just raw truth laid out between them like cards on a table. I don't know what I want yet, Clara said carefully. This life,
It's so different from what I planned, what I expected. You don't have to know. That's what the winter's for, figuring it out. And if I decide to leave in spring?
Then I'll take you back like I promised. No anger, no guilt, just two people who tried something and decided it wasn't right. He paused. But I hope you'll stay.
Why?
Because you make this cabin feel like a home instead of just a shelter. Because you laugh at my terrible jokes and call me out when I'm being stubborn. Because for the first time in 15 years, I don't dread waking up to another day alone. His voice dropped. Because I'm halfway in love with you already, and I think maybe you feel something too, even if you're not ready to admit it. Clara's world tilted sideways. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried to find words that wouldn't come.
You don't have to say anything, Elias said quickly. I just needed you to know. So when spring comes and you're making your choice, you have all the information. He stood and moved toward the bedroom, giving her space. Elias? Clara called after him. He stopped, turned. I'm scared, she admitted, of what I'm starting to feel, of what it means, of trusting this. I know, I'm scared too. But you said it anyway, because being scared and being honest aren't mutually exclusive. He offered a small smile. Get some sleep, Clara. We'll talk more when you're ready. He disappeared into what used to be his bedroom, leaving Clara alone by the fire with her thoughts spinning like a blizzard. She was falling for him. The realization hit with the force of an avalanche. Somewhere between learning to shoot and fighting mountain lions, between chess games and quiet conversations, she'd started caring about Elias Mercer in a way that went far beyond gratitude or obligation. The terrifying part was she didn't know what to do about it. The brutal cold lasted 4 days. On the morning of the 5th day, Clara woke to the sound of something crashing outside. She grabbed the rifle, always within reach now, and ran into the main room. Elias was already at the door, peering through a crack. Stable roof collapsed. Too much snow weight. Are the horses? I need to check. Stay here. Like hell. Clara was already pulling on her coat. 2 sets of hands work faster than one. They plunged into snow up to their thighs, fighting their way to the stable. The roof had caved in on the left side, timbers cracked and sagging. Inside, both horses were wild-eyed but appeared unharmed, pressed against the far wall away from the collapse. We need to get them out before the rest comes down, Elias said. I'll handle the stallion. Can you manage yours? Yes. Clara waded through snow and debris to her horse, speaking in the calm voice Elias had taught her. The mare was terrified but trusted her enough to be led outside into the temporary shelter Elias had rigged against the cabin wall. They worked for hours in the brutal cold, clearing debris, shoring up the damaged section with spare timber, creating a safe space for the animals. By the time they finished, both were soaked with sweat that was already freezing against their skin. Inside, Elias ordered, before we both get frostbite. Back in the cabin, they stripped off wet clothes with numb fingers. Clara was too cold to care about modesty, changing into dry things, while Elias did the same across the room. When she finally thawed enough to think clearly, she found him examining his left hand with a frown. What's wrong? Nothing, just a splinter? Let me see. He held out his hand reluctantly. A large piece of wood was embedded deep in his palm, the skin around it already red and swollen. This isn't a splinter. This is a stake. Clara grabbed her sewing kit. Sit down. I need to get it out before it gets infected. I can do it myself. Sit. Down. Elias sat. Clara cleaned the area with whiskey, then used her smallest needle to work the wood free. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just watched her work with those storm gray eyes. You're good at this, he said quietly. I've sewn up my share of injuries. Papa was always cutting himself on something. She pulled the last bit of wood free, cleaned the wound again. This'll need bandaging. You don't have to. Stop arguing with me. I'm helping you whether you like it or not. That pulled a real smile from him. You've gotten bossy. I've gotten practical. There's a difference. She wrapped his hand in clean cloth. There, try not to get it dirty. In a mountain cabin during winter. That'll be easy. Clara started to pull away, but Elias caught her wrist with his good hand. His grip was gentle, questioning. Thank you, he said, for helping with the stable. For this. For staying. I haven't decided about staying yet. But you're still here. That counts.
His thumb traced small circles on the inside of her wrist, probably unconsciously. Clara's pulse jumped under his touch. She should pull away, should maintain the distance she'd carefully built. Instead, she stayed exactly where she was. Your heart's racing, Elias observed. I know. Are you scared? Yes. Of me? Of this. Whatever this is becoming. But she still didn't pull away. Elias released her wrist and cupped her face instead, his calloused palm rough against her cheek. Clara, I need you to tell me something honestly. If I kissed you right now, would you hate me for it? Her breath caught. No. Would you want me to? The question hung between them like a held breath. Clara's mind raced through every reason she should say no. They barely knew each other. This was all happening too fast. She'd promised herself she'd wait until spring to make any decisions, but her heart knew the answer before her head could catch up. Yes, she whispered. Elias leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, to pull away. When she didn't, he kissed her. It was nothing like Clara imagined. Not forceful or demanding, just soft and careful and achingly gentle, like he was afraid she might break. His hand slid into her hair while his other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. Clara melted into him, fingers clutching his shirt, everything else falling away except this moment, this man, this feeling of finally coming home after a lifetime of wandering. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elias rested his forehead against hers. We should stop, he said, though he made no move to release her. Why? Because if we don't, I'm going to carry you into that bedroom and we're not coming out until morning. And I promised I wouldn't pressure you, that this would be your choice. What if I'm choosing this? Are you, or is it just the isolation talking? The proximity? I need to know the difference, Clara. I need to know you really want this and aren't just... She kissed him again, cutting off his words. This time there was nothing gentle about it. She poured every confused feeling, every moment of fear and hope, and growing trust into that kiss, trying to communicate what words couldn't. When she pulled back, Elias's eyes had darkened to smoke. Does that answer your question? She asked. It raises about a dozen new ones. Then stop asking and start doing something about it. He laughed, a real, genuine sound of joy, and swept her into his arms. Clara yelped in surprise as he carried her toward the bedroom. You know, she said, wrapping her arms around his neck, I thought you were supposed to be the patient, careful one. I am, but I'm not a saint, and you just gave me permission to stop pretending to be one. He laid her on the bed with surprising gentleness, then paused, studying her face in the firelight that filtered through the open door. Last chance, he said quietly. We crossed this line. There's no going back. You understand that? Clara pulled him down to her. Stop talking. The snow fell silent outside while the fire burned low. Later, much later, Clara lay tangled in blankets in Elias's arms, listening to his heartbeat under her ear. His hand traced lazy patterns on her back, neither of them speaking, neither needing to. You're thinking too loud, Elias finally said. I can hear it from here. I'm just processing. Regretting? No. She propped herself up to look at him. Surprised, maybe, that it could be like that. Like what? Good, real, not just functional. She struggled for words. My mother told me marriage was a duty, something women endured, but that wasn't... I didn't feel like I was enduring anything. Elias's expression softened. Is that what you expected? Endurance? I didn't know what to expect. I just knew most women I'd met seemed resigned to their marriages, not happy about them. She laid her head back down on his chest. You're different. Different how? You actually seem to care about what I want, what I feel, like my pleasure matters as much as yours. Of course it matters. What kind of man doesn't care about... He stopped. Never mind. I know exactly what kind. I've met plenty. But you're not like them. I try not to be. Doesn't always work, but I try. Clara traced the scars on his chest, following the pale lines in the dim light. How did you get this one? Grizzly. Told you about that? And this one? Knife fight in a trading post. Other guy started it. Did you finish it? He walked away. So did I. That's all that matters. She found another scar, this one long and jagged across his ribs.
This? Fell off a cliff, landed on some rocks. Miracle I survived. How many times have you almost died? Stopped counting after 20. You live up here long enough, close calls just become part of the routine. Clara shuddered. That's terrifying. That's reality. He caught her hand, brought it to his lips. But I'm still here, still breathing, and for the first time in years, I actually care about staying that way. Because of me? Because of you.
The simple honesty of it made Clara's chest ache. She shifted closer, pressing herself against him like she could absorb his warmth, his strength, his unwavering presence. I'm not leaving in spring, she said quietly. Elias went still. What? I'm not leaving. I'm staying with you, here. She lifted her head to meet his eyes. I don't know when I decided exactly. Maybe tonight, maybe weeks ago. But I know now. This is where I want to be. Clara, you don't have to decide tonight. You can take your time. I don't need more time. I need you. She cupped his face. I love you. I didn't want to. I fought against it, but I do. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise. Elias stared at her like she'd just handed him the moon. You love me? Yes, you terrifying mountain savage. I love you. He pulled her into a kiss that tasted like relief and joy, and promises neither of them had to speak out loud. When they finally broke apart, his eyes were suspiciously bright. I love you too, he said roughly, in case that wasn't obvious. It was, but it's nice to hear anyway. They fell asleep tangled together, warm despite the cold outside, safe despite the wilderness surrounding them. Clara's last conscious thought was that she'd never felt more protected, more wanted, more home than she did right now in this mountain cabin with this scarred, gentle man who'd crossed half the territory to save her. Morning came with weak winter sunlight filtering through frost-covered windows. Clara woke to find Elias already up, standing by the window and staring out at something she couldn't see. What's wrong? She asked, immediately alert. Riders, 4 of them, coming up the valley trail. Clara's blood went cold. Who? Don't know yet. But they're armed, and they're moving with purpose. He grabbed his rifle. Get dressed. Stay inside until I know who they are and what they want. Elias, please, Clara. Just this once. Don't argue. The fear in his voice scared her more than the unknown riders. She dressed quickly, loaded her own rifle, and positioned herself by the window where she could see but not be seen. The riders approached slowly, picking their way through deep snow. As they got closer, Clara's stomach dropped. Victor Hale rode in front, expensive coat now worn from travel, his face harder and colder than she remembered. Behind him were 3 men she didn't recognize, hired guns by the look of them, heavily armed and alert. That's Hale, she breathed. Elias's expression went flat and dangerous. Stay inside, no matter what happens. You can't face them alone. Clara! He looked at her with eyes that had gone cold as winter ice. If something happens to me, you run. You grab supplies, take your horse, and ride to Blue Crow Woman's camp. You understand? I'm not leaving you. You will if I tell you to, because you staying and dying with me doesn't accomplish anything except getting us both killed. He gripped her shoulders. Promise me. Elias, Peter, promise me. I promise, she lied. He must have known she was lying, but there was no time to argue. Hale and his men had reached the clearing. Elias stepped onto the porch, rifle ready, every line of his body radiating lethal threat. Clara watched from the window, her own rifle aimed at the nearest rider. That's far enough, Elias called out. State your business. Hale pulled his horse to a stop, smiling that cold smile Clara remembered too well. Elias Mercer, we finally meet properly. I'm Victor Hale. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Nothing here belongs to you. I disagree. You see, Clara Beaumont's father owed me a debt. That debt hasn't been paid in full. I paid it, $500. You took the money. I took partial payment, but the original agreement included the girl. Hale's smile widened. Since you interfered with that arrangement, I consider it void, which means the debt still stands. And now I'm here to collect what I'm owed, with interest. Clara's hands tightened on her rifle. Through the window, she could see Elias calculating odds, looking for angles. You rode 2 weeks through winter hell to collect a debt you already got paid for, Elias said. That doesn't make sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense when you consider what I discovered after you stole my property. Hale dismounted, his men doing the same. You see, I had that worthless homestead surveyed. Guess what we found underneath all that failed farmland? Clara's breath stopped. Silver, Hale continued, one of the richest deposits in Montana Territory, worth millions. And since Clara's parents are both dead now, tragic winter illness, very sad, she's the sole heir. His eyes gleamed with greed, which means whoever marries her controls that fortune. Now, did you two actually get married, or was this just an abduction? We're married, Elias said flatly. Prove it. Show me papers. Silence, because there were no papers. No ceremony, no legal bond. That's what I thought. Hale's smile turned vicious. So really, you're just a kidnapper who's been holding a valuable heiress hostage all winter. I'm here to rescue her and claim what's rightfully mine, both the girl and the mine. Clara's not going anywhere with you. That's not your decision, Hale gestured to his men. Take her. Everything happened at once. The three hired guns raised their weapons. Elias fired, dropping one man before he could aim. Clara threw open the window and fired at another, her shot going wide but making him dive for cover. Bullets tore through the cabin walls. Wood splintered, glass shattered. Elias ducked back inside, slamming the door. I told you to run! And I told you I'm not leaving! Clara reloaded, fired again through the broken window. This time she hit flesh. One of the gunmen screamed and went down, clutching his leg. We're pinned, Elias said, assessing their situation with brutal efficiency. They've got us surrounded, and they're not going anywhere. So what do we do? He looked at her, and Clara saw the calculation in his eyes. The terrible math of survival. We fight, he said simply, and if we're lucky, we both live through it. Outside, Hale's voice rang across the clearing. This doesn't have to end in blood, Mercer. Send out the girl, and I'll let you live. Go to hell, Clara shouted back before Elias could respond. She heard Hale's laughter, cold and cruel. Have it your way. Boys, burn them out. Through the shattered window, Clara watched one of the men produce a torch. Her heart hammered against her ribs as reality crashed down. They were trapped in a wooden cabin surrounded by armed men who wanted her dead or captured. This was how their story ended, unless they found another way to write it. The root cellar, Elias said suddenly. There's a tunnel I dug last year. Emergency exit. Goes out past the tree line. Clara stared at him. You have an escape tunnel and you're just mentioning this now? Didn't think we'd need it? He was already moving, throwing open the trapdoor hidden under a rug near the fireplace. Come on, we've got maybe 2 minutes before they light this place up. What about our supplies, the horses? Forget them. We stay. We die. Move. Clara grabbed her rifle and the small pack Elias thrust at her. Through the broken window, she could see the torchbearer approaching the cabin wall. The other gunmen provided cover, weapons trained on the doors and windows. She dropped into the darkness of the root cellar, Elias right behind her. The tunnel entrance was barely visible in the dim light, a narrow opening at the back, reinforced with timber. Crawl fast, Elias said. Don't stop no matter what you hear. The tunnel was tight and dark and smelled like earth and fear. Clara's hand scraped against frozen dirt as she pulled herself forward. Behind her, she heard Elias doing something with the trap door, then the sound of him following. Above them, muffled shouts, the crash of breaking wood, and then a roar as fire caught. Keep moving, Elias urged. Clara crawled faster, ignoring the pain in her knees, the scrape of rock against her shoulders. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, narrowing in places until she had to exhale completely just to squeeze through. Finally, she saw light ahead. Not much, just the gray glow of winter afternoon filtering through snow and branches. She pushed through the exit, a hole disguised as a natural depression under a fallen log, and emerged into cold air that burned her lungs. Elias came out seconds later, already scanning their surroundings. We're about 50 yards from the cabin, he said quietly. They'll realize soon we're not inside. When they do, they'll search. We need to be gone before that happens. Gone where? They have our horses. No, they have the horses in the stable. I've got 2 more hidden in a box canyon about a mile north. Insurance policy. He grabbed her hand. Can you run in this snow? I can try. They ran, or rather, they struggled through waist-deep snow, fighting for every step. Behind them, Clara heard shouts as Hale's men discovered the empty cabin, the sound of pursuit.
They're following our tracks, Clara gasped. I know. Just keep moving. Almost there. The mile felt like 10. Clara's legs screamed, her lungs burned, sweat froze on her skin. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop, because stopping meant capture, and capture meant hail, and hail meant a fate worse than death. The box canyon appeared suddenly, a narrow cleft in the rock face hidden by evergreens. Inside, 2 horses waited, already saddled. Elias had planned for this, actually planned for total disaster and prepared accordingly. You're insane, Clara panted as she mounted. I'm careful. There's a difference. He swung onto his own horse. We head north to Blue Crow Woman's camp. Her people will hide us. For how long? Hale won't give up. Long enough to figure out our next move. Elias urged his horse forward. Come on. They rode hard through the forest, following paths only Elias knew. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit faded but didn't disappear. Hale's men were tracking them, following the obvious trail through snow. We can't outrun them forever, Clara said as they paused to let the horses breathe. They'll just keep coming. I know. So what's the plan? Elias was quiet for a moment, staring back the way they'd come. When he spoke, his voice was hard. We make them stop coming. How? There's a place about 2 miles ahead, a cliff overlooking the valley trail. If we can get above them, get the right angle. He met her eyes. I can end this. But it's going to be dangerous, and it's going to be loud. Clara understood what he wasn't saying. You're going to cause an avalanche. It's the only way to stop them for good. The snow's unstable up there after all these storms. One well-placed shot could bring down half the mountainside. He paused. But if I miss, or if the timing's wrong, it could come down on us instead. Those are terrible odds. They're the only odds we've got. He reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. I can do this, Clara, but I need you to trust me. She looked at this man who'd saved her twice now, who'd taught her to survive, who'd given her a life she never knew she wanted, who loved her enough to risk everything. I trust you, she said. They rode for the cliff. The place Elias had in mind was called Devil's Anvil, according to Blue Crow Woman's people, a massive granite outcropping that jutted over the main valley trail like a stone tongue. Below it, unstable snow clung to steep slopes, held in place by nothing but luck and cold temperatures. Elias positioned them on the cliff's edge, both of them belly down in the snow, rifles ready. They'll come up that trail, he said, pointing to the narrow path below. When they're directly underneath, I'll take the shot. Aim for that overhang there. See it? The one that looks like it's already cracking. And if you miss? Then we find out if we can outrun an avalanche. He checked his rifle's sight. But I won't miss. Clara watched the trail, her own rifle ready. Minutes crawled by. Her fingers went numb from cold. Just when she thought maybe Hale's men had lost the trail, she heard hoofbeats. 4 riders appeared below. Hale in front, the 3 remaining gunmen behind. They moved slowly, carefully, studying the snow for tracks. When I shoot, cover your ears, Elias whispered. This is going to be loud. He took his time, lining up the shot with the patience of someone who understood that one mistake meant death. Clara watched his breathing slow, watched him become absolutely still. The rifle boomed. The sound echoed off the mountains like thunder. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Then the snow began to move. It started small, just a trickle of white cascading down the slope. Then more and more. Within seconds, the entire mountainside seemed to collapse. Thousands of tons of snow and ice roaring downward with the sound of an angry god. Below them, Hale's horse reared. The men scattered, trying to escape, but there was nowhere to go. The valley trail was too narrow, the walls too steep. The avalanche hit like a breaking wave. Clara watched in horrified fascination as white swallowed everything. Men, horses, the trail itself. The roar was deafening, the power absolute. When it finally stopped, nothing remained but smooth white slopes and terrible silence. Are they? Clara couldn't finish the sentence. Elias was already scanning the snow below with a small telescope he'd pulled from his pack. After a long moment, he lowered it. I don't see movement, he said quietly. They're gone. Clara waited to feel something, triumph, relief, guilt. Instead, she just felt numb. I should feel bad about this. Do you? No.
Is that wrong? They came to kill us, to take you by force, to burn us alive if we resisted. Elias put away the telescope. You don't owe sympathy to people who wanted you dead. My mother would say that makes us no better than them.
Your mother never had to fight for her life in the mountains. He stood, offering his hand. We survived. That's what matters. Everything else is just philosophy. They rode to Blue Crow Woman's camp in silence. The Salish winter settlement was tucked into a protected valley, a collection of sturdy lodges arranged around central fires. Blue Crow Woman emerged from one of them as they approached, took one look at their faces and nodded. Trouble found you, she said. It wasn't a question.
Trouble's buried under 10 tons of snow now, Elias replied. Good. Come inside. You both look half frozen. They spent 3 days with the Salish, recovering from their ordeal and planning their next move. Blue Crow Woman's husband, a quiet man named Running Elk, confirmed that no one had survived the avalanche. The trail was completely buried. It would take weeks to dig out the bodies, if anyone even bothered trying. The White Law won't care about men who died chasing someone into the mountains during winter, Running Elk said. They'll call it foolishness and close the case. What about the silver mine? Clara asked. Hale told people about it before he came after us. Someone will try to claim it. Let them fight over it, Elias said. That mine has caused nothing but pain. Let it stay buried with the man who wanted it. But Clara couldn't stop thinking about it. About her parents' land, about the fortune sitting beneath worthless dirt. About what that money could do. For them, for Blue Crow Woman's people, for everyone scraping by in this harsh territory. I want to go back, she said on the 4th morning. To Dust Creek. To see what's left. Elias looked at her carefully. Why? Because that mine is legally mine. My inheritance. And I want to decide what happens to it instead of letting some claim jumper steal it. She met his eyes. I don't want the silver, but I want the choice about what to do with it. It's a long ride in winter. Dangerous. Everything we do is dangerous. That hasn't stopped us yet. A smile tugged at his mouth. No, it hasn't. They left the next morning with supplies from Blue Crow Woman and directions from Running Elk. The journey south took 2 weeks of hard riding through snow and cold. But when they finally reached Dust Creek in mid-January, Clara barely recognized it. Her family's homestead was gone. Not just abandoned, systematically destroyed. The barn had been torn apart, presumably during Hale's search for the silver. The house was a burned shell. Even the well had been excavated, leaving a gaping hole in the frozen ground. Clara stood in the ruins of her childhood home and felt nothing but cold distance. This place had stopped being home months ago. You all right? Elias asked quietly. Yeah, just saying goodbye, I guess. She turned away from the wreckage. Let's go into town. I need to file a claim with the land office. Helena was chaos. Word of the silver strike had spread, and prospectors flooded the territory office demanding rights to survey the Beaumont homestead. Clara pushed through the crowd, Elias at her back, until she reached the clerk's desk. I'm Clara Beaumont, she announced, and I'm here to claim my inheritance. The room went quiet. Every prospector turned to stare at the young woman in worn mountain clothes standing beside a scarred giant who looked like he'd been carved from violence. The clerk blinked. Miss Beaumont, we heard you were dead. Victor Hale said, Victor Hale lied about a lot of things. I'm very much alive, and that silver mine belongs to me. It took 3 days of legal wrangling, but Clara's claim was ironclad. The land had been in her father's name, passed to her mother upon his death, and to Clara when her mother died. No one could challenge it. The mining companies came offering millions. Clara turned them all down. Instead, she did something no one expected. She sold the land and mining rights to a cooperative of small-time prospectors, men who'd been crowded out by big money operations, who needed a break, who would split the profits fairly among themselves. She sold it for a fraction of what the big companies offered, with one condition. 10% of all profits would be donated to Salish communities displaced by mining operations. The lawyers thought she was insane. The mining companies called her a fool. But Clara didn't care. That silver came from land that should have belonged to Blue Crow Woman's people in the first place, she told Elias as they signed the papers. The least I can do is make sure they see some benefit from it. You could have been one of the richest women in Montana Territory. I could have been a lot of things. She set down the pen. But I'd rather be someone who can sleep at night. They left Helena with enough money to last years.
Not a fortune, but more than enough. As they rode north toward the mountains, Clara felt lighter than she had in months. "So what now?" Elias asked as they climbed into the foothills. "We going to rebuild the cabin?" "Eventually, but first I want to see the rest of the mountains. All those places you've told me about. The high meadows where the elk gather, the hot springs you found when you were 20, that valley where the stars look close enough to touch." "That'll take all summer." "Good, I've got all summer." She smiled at him. "I've got the rest of my life, actually. Might as well spend it exploring." Elias reached across the space between their horses and caught her hand. "You sure about this?" "About all of it. You could still go back to civilization, find an easier life." "I had civilization. It was dying of thirst on worthless land while men like Hale decided my fate." Clara squeezed his hand. "This life is hard. It's dangerous. It's isolated. But it's mine. I chose it. That makes all the difference. We should probably get actually married at some point. Make it legal." "Probably, but there's no rush." "I'm not going anywhere." "Neither am I." They rode into the mountains as spring began to soften the edges of winter. The snow melted in patches, revealing green underneath. Birds returned to the valley. The lake thawed, its surface rippling in warm wind. By April, they'd built a new cabin in a different valley, this one even more remote than the first. Elias taught Clara to hunt elk. She taught him to read Shakespeare without stumbling over the words. They planted a garden together, built furniture together, survived together. Blue Crow Woman visited in May, bringing news from Helena. The cooperative mine was producing well. The Salish communities were using their share of the profits to buy back ancestral land from the government. Victor Hale's death had been ruled accidental. Wrong place, wrong time. Nature's indifference. "No one's asking questions," she reported. "You're free." "We were always free," Clara said. "We just had to fight for it." Summer came with wild strawberries and warm nights and long conversations under stars that really did seem close enough to touch. Clara learned every scar on Elias's body, every story that shaped him. He learned her fears and dreams and the parts of herself she'd kept hidden even from her own family. They fought sometimes. Clara's stubbornness clashed with Elias's overprotectiveness. He hated when she took unnecessary risks. She hated when he tried to make decisions for her. But they learned to talk through it, to compromise, to respect that they were partners, not owner and owned. In August, they rode to a small settlement 3 days north and found a circuit preacher. They got married properly this time. Nothing fancy, just words spoken in front of witnesses who didn't care about their past, only their present. Clara wore a simple dress Blue Crow Woman had made. Elias wore clean buckskins and looked uncomfortable the entire time. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Elias kissed her like he was afraid she might disappear. "You're stuck with me now," Clara said against his mouth. "Legal and everything." "Good. I wasn't planning on letting you go anyway." They spent their first official night as a married couple under the stars, wrapped in blankets, talking about the future. About maybe building a trading post for trappers. About teaching young settlers how to survive mountain winters. About the children they might have someday, though neither was in a rush. "You ever regret it?" Elias asked as Clara lay against his chest, watching stars wheel overhead. "Choosing this over the easy path?" "Every path has its price," Clara said. "At least with this one, I gotta set the terms." "That's not an answer." "Yes, it is. It's just not the answer you expected." She shifted to look at him. "I don't regret choosing you. I don't regret choosing this life. But do I sometimes miss my parents? Miss knowing what tomorrow will bring? Miss the comfort of routine?" "Yeah, sometimes." "That's honest." "You want pretty lies or ugly truth?" "Always truth. Even when it hurts." Clara smiled. "Then here's a truth. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. And I'd choose this hard, dangerous, beautiful life with you over a safe, predictable one without you, every single time." Elias pulled her closer, and Clara felt his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. This was what home felt like. Not a place, not 4 walls and a roof, but this. 2 people who'd survived impossible odds and chose each other anyway. The wooden sparrow sat on their new cabin's mantel now, next to a carving Elias had made of a mountain lion. Symbols of the past and present, of danger survived and choices made. Sometimes Clara would take down the sparrow and remember the terrified girl who'd almost drowned in the Missouri River, the desperate woman who'd been sold to pay a debt. The fighter who'd learned to shoot and hunt and stand her ground. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who'd learned that true freedom wasn't the absence of hardship, but the power to choose which hardships you'd endure and why. Winter came again, as it always did in the mountains, but this time Clara faced it with confidence born of experience. She knew how to survive now. More than that, she knew how to live. On the first night of snowfall, she and Elias sat on their porch watching white descend from an iron sky. The world was silent except for the whisper of wind through pines and the occasional crack of ice on the distant lake. "You think we'll ever go back down there?" Clara asked, gesturing vaguely toward civilization. "To Helena or anywhere else?" "Do you want to? Sometimes I think it would be nice to see a play. Eat food someone else cooked. Wear a dress that doesn't smell like wood smoke." She leaned against him. "But then I remember what's down there. The Victor Hales of the world. The people who see other people as resources. The endless competition for status and money and power. And up here? Up here, we compete with the mountain. And the mountain doesn't care about money or status. It just is. Honest in its danger. Fair in its indifference." She took his hand. "I prefer honest danger to dishonest safety." "You've become quite the philosopher." "I've had a good teacher." They sat in comfortable silence as snow erased their footprints, covered the paths, turned the world clean and new. Tomorrow they'd dig out. Tomorrow they'd hunt and gather and work to survive another day. But tonight, they simply existed together, two people who'd found something more valuable than silver or safety or certainty. They'd found each other. And in the harsh mathematics of the wilderness, that was the only equation that mattered. Clara touched the wooden sparrow in her pocket one last time, then let it go. She didn't need talismans anymore, didn't need symbols of the past to validate the present. She had Elias. She had her strength. She had a life built on her own terms in a place where freedom meant something real. The snow fell silent and steady, burying the world in white. And in their cabin, high in the Bitterroot Mountains, two people who'd been bought and sold and broken and rebuilt held each other close and watched winter come. They'd survived worse than snow. They'd survived this too, together, always together. That was the promise, the only one that mattered. And unlike all the broken promises that had led them here, this one they intended to keep.